In the late 70s, a driver could pull his Kenworth W900 into a shop off Interstate 40 in Amarillo, hand the mechanic a folded stack of 20s, and roll out an hour later with more power, more light, and more noise than the factory ever intended. Nobody wrote anything down. Nobody asked. Today, the same afternoon of wrenching can generate federal penalties past $25,000 on a single truck. We're counting down 12 banned modifications that old-school drivers still swear by. And number one is the mod that put entire shops out of business and a few owners in front of a judge. But to understand why drivers modified anything at all, you have to remember what the golden age actually looked like. A factory. Peterbilt 359 came off the line underpowered, underlit, and quiet as a church mouse compared to what its owner had in mind. The truck was the driver's house, his office, and his billboard rolling down Interstate 80, and every owner-operator from Fontana, California to Breezewood, Pennsylvania, made it his own with a torch, a toolbox, and a parts counter guy who knew how to keep a secret. One by one, Washington outlawed nearly all of it. Here's the list, what each mod did back then, and what it costs now. And fair warning, the fines climb as we count down. The first few will cost you a ticket. The last 3 can cost you the truck. Number 12, blue dot taillights and outlaw cab lighting. The blue dot started on hot rods in the 50s, a little cobalt glass jewel pressed into the center of a red taillight lens that made the light glow purple at night. By the 70s, they'd migrated onto Peterbilts and Kenworths, right alongside rows of extra chicken lights tracing every line of the cab and trailer. A rig lit up like a carnival coming through the desert outside Barstow at 2 in the morning was a thing of real beauty. The problem is that federal lighting rules are strict about color. Red and blue facing forward can get a driver cited for impersonating an emergency vehicle in most states, and that charge carries fines in the hundreds, and in a few states, a misdemeanor arrest. Even the beloved blue dot is flatly illegal in the majority of the country because a taillight has to show pure red. Extra marker lights in amber and red are still mostly fine, which is why the chicken light tradition survives at truck shows from Joplin to Walcott. But the colored glass, the purple glow, and the green cab lights the real outlaws ran are all write-ups waiting to happen at any roadside inspection. Most old hands will tell you the highway got safer over the years, but it also got a whole lot darker. Number 11, limo tint on the cab glass. Sun glare on a westbound run across Nebraska in July is brutal, and air conditioning in older cabovers was a rumor more than a feature. So drivers tinted the windows dark, sometimes dark enough that you couldn't tell if anyone was in the seat at all. There was a privacy angle too. What happened in the cab stayed in the cab. Federal rules ended the debate, requiring the windshield and both front side windows on a commercial vehicle to let through at least 70% of visible light, which is barely any tint at all. Inspectors now carry electronic tint meters, and a dark window is one of the easiest violations on the entire inspection sheet. The fine itself usually runs a couple $100s, but the citation lands on the carrier's safety record, and a driver can be ordered to sit until the film comes off, peeling it in a scale house parking lot with a razor blade while his delivery window dies. Not many things on this list are cheaper to undo. Almost nothing on this list is more annoying to get caught with. And compared to what's next, tinted glass was downright quiet. Number 10, real locomotive train horns. Somewhere along the line, a driver figured out that retired locomotives got scrapped with their Nathan air chime horns still attached, and that a truck's air system pushed more than enough pressure to blow one. The result was a highway tractor that sounded like a freight train coming through a crossing, well past 145 decibels, loud enough to rattle windows a quarter mile away. Drivers swore by them as safety equipment, and to be fair, nothing moves a four-wheeler out of the hammer lane like the honest belief that a locomotive is somehow behind him. Cities didn't see the humor. Municipal noise ordinances across the country cap horn output and ban what many of them call unreasonably loud warning devices, with fines that start around a couple $100s and stack fast for repeat offenders. A few states treat an oversized air horn as an equipment violation all on its own, which means it can show up on an inspection report even if it never made a sound. The train horn under the frame became one of those mods a driver kept quiet about, which is a strange fate for the loudest object ever bolted to a truck. But the next modification wasn't about show at all. It came out of the Great Depression, and it rode on the most dangerous axle on the truck. Number 9. Regrooved rubber on the steer axle. Cutting fresh tread grooves into a worn tire with a hot knife goes back to the 30s, when a tire cost a week's pay and nobody threw anything away. Regrooving is still legal today on tires built for it and marked regroovable on the sidewall. The outlaw part was where drivers put them. Money was tight, and a set of cut or recapped tires on the steer axle saved hundreds of dollars over new rubber. Federal regulations now ban regrooved tires on the front wheels of a highway tractor, and inspectors check the sidewall stamping for exactly that reason. The logic is grim and simple. When a drive tire lets go, you lose a mud flap. When a steer tire lets go at 65 miles an hour with 80,000 pounds pushing from behind, you can lose the whole truck. Any veteran who ran the Pennsylvania Turnpike in the 70s has a story about a gator in the road that used to be somebody's front tire. And some of those stories end at the bottom of an embankment. Getting caught today means a violation, points on the carrier's score, and in bad cases an out-of-service order until real rubber goes on. Cheap tires up front were never a bargain. They were a loan, and the interest rate was terrible. Number 8. The front brake delete. This one sounds made up to younger drivers, but for years you could order a brand new tractor from the factory with no front brakes at all and plenty of old hands who had them remove the parts anyway. The belief, handed down at every truck stop counter from Little America, Wyoming to the Iowa 80, was that front brakes caused jackknifes on ice, and that a real driver wanted his steer axle rolling free so he could steer out of trouble. Whole fleets ran that way through the 60s and 70s. The research eventually said the opposite, that front brakes shortened stopping distance dramatically and that the jackknife fear was mostly myth. And in the 1980s, the federal government mandated working brakes on every wheel of a commercial vehicle. Today, a tractor with disconnected or missing front brakes is an automatic out-of-service order at any scale, and depending on the state, the fine and the tow bill together can run well past $1,000 before the truck moves another foot. Here's the part that still starts arguments at any diner counter along Interstate 81. Some of the men who drove 1,000,000 miles without front brakes never had a single jackknife, and no study on earth will ever convince them. The next mod didn't touch the brakes at all. It rode under the frame, and it only came down when the law was watching. Number 7. The in-cab lift axle cheat. Anywhere the weight laws bit hard. Michigan gravel trains, Pennsylvania coal country, the log roads of the Northwest. Drivers bolted on lift axles, extra wheels that dropped down to spread the load and raise the legal gross. The axle itself was perfectly legal. The cheat was the little regulator knob mounted under the dash. Turned down, the lift axle barely kissed the pavement, saving a set of tires and a gallon or two of fuel while the drive axles quietly carried weight. The law said they couldn't. Coming up on a scale, the driver cranked the knob, the bags filled, and by the time the platform read each axle group, everything sat legal to the pound. States eventually caught on and rewrote the rules, requiring preset pressure regulators sealed and mounted outside the cab where a rolling driver can't reach them. Get caught today with a live in-cab control in a state that bans one and it's an equipment violation stacked on an axle weight citation, an axle fine scale by the pound so a rigged knob can turn a routine crossing into a four-figure morning. The old boys called it load management. The scale master calls it Exhibit A. If these stories are bringing back some memories, do me a favor and hit subscribe. This channel covers the golden age of trucking every single week. The trucks, the truck stops, and the tricks, and there are a lot more stories where these came from. Number 6. Reefer fuel crossover lines. Every refrigerated trailer hauls its own little tank of diesel to keep the cargo cold, and that fuel comes cheap because Washington doesn't tax it for the highway. It's meant to spin a compressor, not a drive shaft, and to make sure nobody forgets that, it's dyed red. The modification was beautiful in its simplicity. A few feet of quarter-inch line, a brass valve, and suddenly the tractor could sip from the trailer's tank on a long pull down Interstate 95. The crude jobs were a garden hose affair behind the cab. The artful ones ran hidden switches under the dash and looked factory. What none of them could hide was the dye. Solvent red stains a fuel system at concentrations down in the parts per million, and it lingers in filters and tank walls for weeks after the last cheap gallon burned off. One dip tube at a scale house, and the driver isn't explaining a hose anymore. He's explaining tax evasion to the IRS at a penalty that starts around $1,000 and runs $10 for every gallon his tanks can hold. Per tank, per stop. Call it $40 saved on a fill, set against a bill that can outrun the truck payment. The most expensive plumbing in America sold by the foot. Number 5, turning up the pump. Before computers ran everything, a diesel engine was an honest mechanical thing, and buried in the injection pump of a Cummins Big Cam or a Caterpillar 3406 were adjustment screws the factory never wanted touched. A mechanic who knew which ones, and every truck stop from Ontario, California to Carlisle, Pennsylvania had one, could turn up the fuel and wake an engine up by 50 or 100 horsepower in an afternoon. The signature was black smoke rolling out of the stacks under load, and in that era, smoke meant power, and power meant pride. Emissions tampering rules eventually made unauthorized fuel system modifications a federal matter, and the modern descendants of the pump screw, the hot tune, and the smoke switch get hammered hardest of all. Several states now write tickets specifically for rolling coal with fines in the hundreds per offense, and an excessive smoke opacity reading can fail a truck at roadside entirely. The old-timers will tell you a turned-up 400 Cummins pulling Donner Pass with the stacks talking was the best sound the industry ever made. The EPA heard the same sound and reached for a citation book. And once engines went electronic, the government found something even better than a smoke reading. The engine started keeping notes on its own driver. Number 4, the governor unlock. Most fleet iron is electronically capped at 65 or 68 miles an hour, and to a driver paid by the mile. That cap is a pay cut he stares at for 8 hours a day. So certain shops developed a quiet sideline. Plug in a laptop, punch in a password the factory never handed out, and raise the ceiling or erase it altogether. From the outside, nothing changed, and that invisibility is exactly what made it lethal, because the engine computer remembers everything. Road speed histograms, hard brake events, the last 90 seconds before an impact, all of it sits in the module, and after any serious wreck, the reconstruction team pulls it first. When the fleet's paperwork says 65 and the module says 79, there's no argument left to have, only a settlement to negotiate, and juries have hung numbers with 2 commas on that gap. Stack on the quieter costs, avoided engine warranty, and a telematics flag that ends the job by email, and the math never once favored the mod. The old hands aren't wrong that a governed truck turns the hammer lane into a parade, but the extra 10 miles an hour was always on layaway, and the collection notice arrives by subpoena. Which brings us to another electronic argument, one where the old-timers pulled a fuse and dared the truck to disagree. Number 3, pulling the ABS fuse. Anti-lock brakes became mandatory on new air brake tractors in 1997, and a whole generation of drivers who'd learned to feather a brake pedal on Wolf Creek Pass wanted no part of a computer deciding when the brakes would grab. So they pulled the fuse, or unplugged a wheel sensor, and drove on. Their reasoning was experience. A man with 2 million miles trusts his right foot more than he trusts a circuit board bolted to the frame in road salt. The regulations don't care about the argument. Federal rules require the ABS on any truck built with it to work, and the malfunction lamp on the dash tattles instantly. A lit ABS light is one of the most commonly written violations at inspections nationwide. It dings the carrier's safety score, and a disabled system discovered after a crash hands the other side's lawyer his opening statement. The dirty little secret is that plenty of those early systems really were junk, false activations, and corroded sensors that drove owners half mad, which is exactly how the fuse-pulling habit started. The technology got good. The habit, in some sleepers, never fully died. The last two entries on this list aren't tricks at all. They're the two biggest wars ever fought between drivers and the EPA, and the fines are the largest numbers you'll hear today. Number 2, the glider kit. For decades, there was one gloriously legal way to get a brand new truck with a simple old engine. A glider kit was a new cab, frame, and sheet metal shipped without an engine or transmission, and shops dropped in rebuilt pre-emissions power, usually a Detroit Series 60 or an older Cat, engines with no particulate filter, no EGR, and none of the region headaches strangling new trucks. Fitzgerald glider kits in Tennessee turned it into an empire, moving thousands of trucks a year to owner-operators who wanted 2018 comfort wrapped around 1998 reliability. Drivers didn't just like gliders. They evangelized them. Then the EPA moved, capping glider production at a few hundred units per builder starting in 2018 and effectively strangling the industry after a loud political fight that went all the way to Washington. Existing gliders on the road remain legal, which is why a clean one now sells used for more than it cost new, but building your way around modern emissions is finished. California goes further and restricts older engines from registration entirely, so a glider that's perfectly legal in Knoxville can be a paperweight in Fresno. The glider was the last legal loophole. When it closed, a lot of drivers went looking for the illegal one. And that brings us to number 1. Number 1, the full delete. When particulate filters, EGR valves, and DEF systems landed on new trucks, they arrived half-baked. Down on power, plugged with soot, parking drivers on the shoulder of Interstate 10 mid-region, with a load of produce going warm behind them. The response was an underground trade that spread through the industry like a phone number written on a fuel desk napkin. Gut the filter, cap the EGR, fool the DEF computer with a plug-in emulator, straight pipe the exhaust, and flash in a hot tune. The truck ran cooler, pulled harder, and drank less doing it. It was also, from the first turn of the wrench, a federal violation of the Clean Air Act, and here is where the number in the title comes from. The federal penalty schedule allows tampering fines of up to $25,000 per vehicle, and the EPA has used every bit of it, hitting delete shops and tuner outfits with settlements in the millions, some of them raided and padlocked, customer lists and all. California can simply pull a deleted truck's registration, and putting the emissions equipment back on costs $15,000 before the first penalty dollar is paid. Stand at any fuel island tonight, and you'll still hear the delete defended with total conviction, because to the men who ran one, it was never about smog. It was about a working man's truck that actually worked. The government won that war anyway. It usually does. Every mod on that list existed because a driver was trying to squeeze a living out of a machine in a business that never left much margin, and the regulations won. But the men who cut their own tire tread by lantern light and tuned an injection pump by ear built this country doing it, and that deserves remembering. If you ran any of these back in the day, tell us in the comments which ones and which ones we missed, and hit subscribe, because next time we're covering the legendary big-bore engines of the 1970s and why nothing built since has ever sounded the same. Keep the shiny side up.